guys, I am back. This is a game that I played last night. It's the second in the online event that I signed up to, the singles event, where I was doing my sort of more expensive, not more expensive, experimental Beast Herds list. If you want information on that, feel free to just go check out my previous video where I talk a bit more about my list. For this game, I had another Beast Herd mirror, which I don't love. I talked about that a little bit in my last Beast Herd mirror. But one thing I don't think I mentioned is that when two armies have Druidism, the game can be a little bit dull. This one kind of wasn't really, but like they're not very active magic laws. And also, I didn't really have a very good answer for a few things in his army. So he had a Druidism Master, a Centaur BSB, a Beast Lord with Toughness 6, 4 up regen, and a Blessed Inscriptions Great Weapon, 3 Raiding Chariots, 2 units of Ambushing Wildhorn Herd, 8 Feral Hounds, 10 Mongrel Raiders, 31 Longhorns, 15 Great Weapon Centaurs, a Razor Tusk Chariot, some more Feral Hounds, and 2 Gortax. So, Gortax are a real problem. I think I can, so like the Minotaurs, for instance, quite possibly can put enough wounds on them that other things can finish them. The Razor Tusk with a buff might be able to kill them through 2 rounds. And my Centaurs probably can kill a Gortak if I buff them. Assuming the Centaur isn't also buffed, the Gortak is not also buffed. But I didn't have great answers to them, particularly because I didn't even have Swarm of Insects in this list. Also, the Longhorn Herd, backed by Druidism, is quite problematic for me because I don't really have a way to do enough damage to them, I don't think, to ever break them. And a big problem here is the fact that, you know, I've tried to make my Beast Lord a little bit interesting, sort of a bit off meta, but I think he's just a bit crap. So, comparing our 2 generals, like I just lose the matchup basically every time. I guess if I'm 6 attacks, cause with Kingslayer, that makes sense, yep. Hitting on 3s, so I'd probably hit him 5 times, a little bit better because of Primal Fury. Strength 7 would be the call with Wild Form, so wounding on 3s, so like 3 or 4 wounds, and then he'll save half of them, and then he'll regen some of them, or regain heal, whatever I'm talking about. And then he'd have 4 attacks at me, he'd hit 3 times, he'd do like probably 3 wounds because of his rerolls, and maybe 1.5. It's maybe close, but I think his buffs and his healing are sort of better for him. Anyway, I didn't like the idea of them dueling all that much because I thought that I had a disadvantage there. We'll get to the game, if I can get there. There we go. This is actually after my turn 1 charge moves. So before I'd actually moved any units. Basically, these dogs managed to frenzy bait my Minotaurs because I placed them a bit too far up, pretty much. The objectives we're looking at is it's King of the Hill, and he picked his forest, and because we were playing attack and defender, and there was like a little corner of that out, and I picked this forest in my his field, and my forest is basically what we're fighting over. So I did have my general and BSB in range of the minnows, but they still failed their test and had to charge. I charged the dogs mainly because I was trying to get a bit of chaos in this area. So he's got his Gortax here, and his Longhorns here, and his Centaurs over here. Everything else is probably pretty... In fact, most of it's probably pretty easy to tell what everything is. But my main theory was that this could be a lot of trouble, this sort of flank. If I inject some chaos, I'm losing these guys because I failed the frenzy test anyway, so... if I can inject some chaos around here, I might get some good charges and maybe even good overruns for my Centaurs, which was what I was sort of aiming for. So I positioned them looking at that. I moved up a little bit, but not too aggressively with the other things. The gargoyles just danced out of his line of sight. I feel like I had something somewhat important to say here. I'm not sure. We'll move forward. I think I didn't get that many pictures in these ones, to be honest, so some of this you'll have to use your imagination. Okay, so this is the position after after I kill those dogs. I think I just put the hereditary on the dogs because if things charge them, like the chariot specifically, they might not be able to overrun because of a failed fear test, which could be pretty handy. And it was like, he wanted to stop Stone Skin, I think, on the Minotaurs, and he, I think, had 5 dice, and I had 4 left at that time. So I got it off on 1 die, and he was like, well, I can't really throw to stop that, because I want to make sure that I stop Stone Skin, basically. We're going to jump forward, I'm pretty sure, quite far. Yeah, okay, so a lot happens. So, basically, the 2 Gortax and the Race Dust Chariot charge my Minotaurs, and the Radiant Chariots charge the dogs. Everything there evaporates in a puff of smoke. The Gortak that is in the flank of the Minotaurs, who ends up about like on their top corner, or as near as can be, he gets 4-up regen on him. And in my turn, so he pushes up fairly aggressively with the Longhorns. In my turn, I decide to charge my Razor Tusks at his Raiding Chariots, who are kind of stuck in this position. And because of the positions of the Gortax and the Chariots, I had some pretty tasty like flank overrun possibilities there if he held, and it wasn't very far. So he fled, which fled him off the board, and it also actually made his Razor Tusk Chariot flee. So that was a nice little bit of luck early game. And then I just decided, basically, one is I had 2 Gortax, sort of one here and one over here, and I needed to deal with them. And there was a position where I could charge one of them with my Centaurs, where the other one wouldn't be able to see the Centaurs, pretty much. So I was like, well, what have I got here? I have a choice between charging a 4-up regen Gortak, which means I probably don't kill it, because I'd have 12 attacks, assuming he kills my champ. I would hit with a lot of them, probably like 10, because hitting on 3s with rerolls. And I would be wounding on 3s. So that's like 7 wounds, ish. Then he saves half of them, so I do 3 or 4. The thing that I was mainly thinking is if I could afford to try and charge my Razor Tusk at his unbuffed Longhorns. Particularly knowing that because of his positioning, his BSB had actually gone out of the range for Longhorn rerolls. So, what the decision was with the Gortak was I was like, look, I'll win the combat, and probably he'll stick, and that's all fine and dandy, but I think this is a way to kill the Gortak over 2 rounds of combat quite lightly, because he might end up having to buff the Longhorns. What I will need, though, is I won't be able to buff the Centaurs. I'll have to buff the Razor Tusks if I send them into the Longhorns. So, decided to take that risk, even though... I was thinking I probably wouldn't win the combat against the Gortak, but what I needed was to make sure that he didn't do 6 wounds. Because if he does 6 wounds, I'm no longer steadfast. If he does only 5, then I'm steadfast, and I think there's a pretty good chance that I kill him in the 2 rounds of combat. So quite risky, basically, and I decide I'm just going to go for it because it's more interesting in this game, and I feel like I am at a disadvantage list-wise. I don't have good answers to some of his things. So basically, that's sort of what I'm thinking of. I'm taking these risks. I don't know that they're necessarily the best decisions, but they were a way to sort of blow the game open. I get my Razor Tusk into his Longhorns, and I get Stone Skin on them, so that he's wounding me on 6s. and my Centaurs go in unbuffed against his Gortak, and actually kill in one. Like, I rolled absolutely out of the box. I think I did 10 wounds. So, 12 attacks, hitting on 3s with a reroll, then winning on 3s with a reroll, and he's got a 4-up save, and I did 10 wounds. And he failed 9 4-up saves. So, like, just an absolutely ridiculous, like, spring of luck for me. Because what it also did with these chariots dead, his other chariot fleeing, is it got me into the flank of his other Gortak with no counter charges available. So this is like amazing stuff happening right now. And feeling pretty decent about the Razor Tusk on Longhorn's combat because he's wounding me on 6s. So he doesn't have a reroll for his break test, but he does pass that. And then I think the next picture will be relevant. So basically, yeah. So what ends up happening is these Centaurs beat the Gortak by 1 that they overran to his flank, and beat him by 1 because of combat res, basically more than wounds. Because my opponent actually got Stone Skin, I believe, off on them at the time. Maybe, I don't know. But then he failed his stubborn leadership 9 check, so I ran him down. And overran into these Wildhorns, which wasn't really where I wanted to be, but I failed my restrain, and I mean, the Centaurs killed 2 Gortaks. I'm not complaining about any luck in that side at all, because that is just a ridiculous turn of events, basically. In the middle, basically my Razor Tusk ended up losing. By the looks of it, I didn't even have a buff on them. Yeah, I mean, he rolled really well with his Longhorns. Like, I think he did 4 or 5 wounds in the first round and 4 or 5 in the second round, which is pretty crazy when you're winning on 6s. But again, I mean, in terms of luck in this game, I'm definitely having the good part of it. I did ambush my Longhorns here before I thought that Gortak was going to be away, because I was like, well, if I do some damage with the Centaurs, get a counter with the Longhorns, there's a pretty good chance that I can kill it. Turns out they didn't even need to. I brought the Mongrels here basically because I knew that I was going to chaff these Centaurs. And I had a couple of ideas here where I was sort of thinking, even if I just occupy those guys over there and I lose my Mongrels, but those guys aren't turning and flanking and causing me a whole bunch of trouble, I'm actually okay with that trade. Losing points, but sort of controlling that flank is like fine for me, basically. Also, if he did charge the Gargoyles, like I had a couple of things, like I could maybe flee. Actually, I couldn't with the Minotaurs there, as they ended up. But sort of where he was going to be positioned here was if he charged them, he'd be stuck between Minotaurs facing either rear or flank and Mongrels facing either rear or flank, or he'd have to turn to face one of them and give a good charge to the other, basically. He sent his BSB out, and I was kind of fine with that because I just reformed to ranks and went, I think I'm a decent chance of killing this BSB if I get a little bit of luck. Decent chance of sort of winning or drawing the combat anyway. Could quite possibly be alright. What he will basically do here is... this is... I don't even know whose turn this is. I think... Yeah, because... Yes, this is actually on my turn. I didn't win, or I didn't beat the Wildhorns by much, and they stuck there, which is why I got a counter charge into them. And yeah, this is actually... so I sent my Wildhorns into his Longhorns here in the middle. So... I suspected that this was a bad idea. There's a couple of things sort of informing my decision here. So, the BSB is out of range. I will only be able to get 3 models in contact. I've got a static res 7 block, and I've got Druidism. There's no way that I lose that combat. So he'd have a Leadership 9 test, Leadership 8 if I can get Whispers on him, Leadership 7 if I can get the Hereditary on myself. easily failable without a reroll. The problem that I see is that I think his Beast Lord beats mine. And if his Beast Lord beats mine, and he doesn't break, I'm going to lose my General. Probably lose the grind because we've both got Druidism. He's got good output and I've got crap output. What? I think actually... Okay, so this is where we ended up position-wise. The Minotaurs actually charged the Mongrel Raiders up here off the board. So I did get through regen, I think, in my turn. Yeah, I got regen through. Yep, I don't need to do that. My Beast Lord fought... We actually didn't fight in a duel, but my Beast Lord fought his guy just sort of from both of us making way into the unit. He did 2 wounds to me, I did 1 wound to him, which isn't great, particularly because this has happened in my turn. He has a chance to heal himself, I don't have a chance to heal myself. So I'll be fighting against a Beast Lord on 3 wounds, and he'll be fighting against one on 1 wound, which is pretty much lost for me. He does stick the break test, and my opponent in this game thought that it was a mistake from me not to force through to the Hereditary in this situation. Which I think he definitely has a point, because even without a buff, there's no way that I lose that combat. I would have, with my charge, a static of 8. He's got 1 banner. So I'm up by 7 before any dice are rolled. And he would have, what's that? 6 attacks from the unit, and then whatever his BSB can do. I would still have my BSB's attacks, who's got a great weapon. I'd still have my Beast Lord's attacks, and I got a couple of attacks from the unit that might do something. So I should, basically, unless something really weird happened, win the combat. He's stubborn, so it doesn't matter how much I win by. And then with the Hereditary, to be a Leadership 7 test, which he would have failed because you rolled a 9. But going back to the last Beast Herd mirror I played, I remember how my opponent was just bossing all his Leadership 7 and Leadership 6 tests. And I was like, I can't rely on the Hereditary here, because if I don't have a buff off, as soon as he reforms over, he's just going to butcher my unit. So I was sort of thinking, if I have a buff, I might be able to win a grind. Continue to make him take tests is what I thought I could do, basically. Knowing that in a protracted fight, my general dies, which sucks, but it happens. The overall outcome here, let's see what my next picture is. That's actually after the combats. So the overall outcome basically ends up being, I think we can just go to here, that he kills my general. He regrows. I rolled a little bit shit for dispelling, but he regrows, and then we start having a bit of a pillow fight with both of us having 4 up regen. In my next turn, I failed to cast Stone Skin with 4 dice against 3 dice. So he had 3 dispel dice, I had 4 dice. Which is the sort of thing that happens. It's really bad with Druidism, I find, because you're usually like, I'm going to get a defensive buff off, and then if you don't, a lot of the time, because the defensive buffs are so significant, you just lose massively where before you would win. It was huge here, because basically it meant as soon as I didn't get a defensive buff up, like, just the game was lost, basically. It may be... Maybe I was going to lose this grind anyway, but with some good regen rolls, there was a pretty good chance that I'd just keep winning because I've got the static res. So, probably could have gone either way there, but it didn't. And my unit got butchered, and a lot of bad things happened. Yeah, so I think this is probably a good time to point out something that I think is quite important to 9th, I guess. So this game, like, a lot of 9th is basically like risk management. So if we go back to here, or vaguely here, I don't have a picture of the actual right moment, where I went, you know what, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to charge my Centaurs at your Gortak, and I'm going to charge my Razor Tusk at your Longhorns, knowing that I can't buff my Centaurs. That was a risk that went so well for me. I'm like way better than I thought it could possibly go. And the thing is, I just sort of kept taking risks after that. So I was, at this point, I hadn't lost my Centaurs, but I was going to. But I probably wasn't going to lose my Longhorns to anything over here. I've got a good play for this objective. I do have trouble with stopping his Longhorns from getting into my objective. Now, he doesn't have any damage magic, so I could easily have just like bailed out all my characters, for instance. I couldn't get this block out of the line of sight of the Longhorns. I maybe could have, upon rallying these guys, reformed them to chaff him. I certainly, because the Minotaurs didn't fail their frenzy, certainly could have reformed them to chaff him. I decided to basically take the risk. So at this point, I haven't lost characters. I'm going to lose Centaurs. It's like 500 points. I guess I haven't got that much off him, but I've got like 1,300, and he doesn't have much. I guess actually, it is frankly quite close at this stage. So I've sort of solved this big Gortak problem, but I don't necessarily have an answer to the Longhorn problem. And I don't have a good way of getting his Centaurs. I don't have a good way of getting his Wizard or his Longhorns, obviously, or his BSB. So knowing the game situation and that I was actually kind of in a better position than I would have hoped in the matchup, I think it's quite a poor decision to go into those Longhorns and go, like maybe he'll fail Leadership 9. Because I just think that even say we both get buffs up for long enough that it's just a pillow fight that no one ever runs away from, it's still most likely going to lose me my general, and probably if the fight just continues and we keep winning, lose me at least one of those other characters. Which is one of the reasons why I want a better Beast Lord build than what I've got, because my guy's kind of crap. And I think this is just a real situation where I needed to look at the game. I mean, frankly, I might have made a different decision if I was, if this was a top table real life event that I was like, my competitive instincts were coming out and I was trying to, definitely win. This kind of was like, let's kind of see what happens. It's more interesting if I fight you. But the correct decision here, I'm 99% sure, is don't fight those Longhorns. We know that you can't beat them. We know that you're basically relying on your opponent getting unlucky, which, given the form of the game, probably maybe a good idea, but his bad luck didn't continue. And we know that if my opponent doesn't get unlucky, the basic outcome there is that, pretty much at best, I lose my general. I don't really think that that's a justifiable decision for me to make. And I didn't really think about it until afterwards. Like, I'm kind of now. It's like now I'm sort of recognizing what a bad decision that is. I was more sort of like, oh yeah, this is a risk. We'll see what happens. But thinking about it now, it's like, yeah, gonna lose my general, so roughly 600 points-ish. Risking all of my characters and risking like a 400 point block. And yeah, there was a chance that I got a lot of points off him and won this could have won me the objective, whereas otherwise I think I'm just going to draw it, basically. There really wasn't a great... actually, thinking about it, if I jump my characters out and I just put my block where it's sort of blocking him from getting into my objective a bit, I have just as good a chance of holding him up forever as I do if the characters are in there. Because I'm not going to, with his Druidism buffs, I'm not going to grind down the unit. And I'm maybe winning rounds of combat, but relying on him getting unlucky. So the smarter thing here would have been all my characters dance out. my block goes to block him, and then my game plan from then is I want to protect those Wildhorns for long enough that he can't get into my forest. The Centaurs started off sober, so they're not scoring, so I don't have to worry about them getting in there. But I didn't, and I went for sort of the everything risk play, even though it wasn't like this is a 60-40 my way, like I know it's risky, but like I'm ready for it. It was probably, in honesty, less than 20% chance that I have a good outcome from charging those Longhorns. Knowing that if I did lose my general but eventually broke him, like that would still be a win of points, it would still be probably win objective. Whatever. But that's basically a bad decision, and it pretty much cost me the game, I think. My Mongrels also didn't manage to kill the BSB, and then they failed their break test, so... another risk, but I'm still kind of okay with their position and the fact that the BSB has been irrelevant the entire game. Yeah, so basically he butchers those guys. I don't have another picture. The only other thing of relevance is he gets into my objective. I almost got half points for those Centaurs, but I only got them down to 5, so I think 3 would be what I needed. My Longhorns killed the things here, or I think those guys panicked. They got over to his field, and then they were being stared down by these Wildhorns with nothing. And I was just sort of thinking, like, yeah, cool, like, whatever. But then he charged me and got... I think, again, I rolled kind of poorly. I don't know. He managed to get Stone Skin. Whatever happened, he managed to get Stone Skin and was unbuffed. So I was then wounding him on 5s. And he had, I think, more attacks because he had more models at that time. He managed to do from... I think if I was 5-wide, he was 7-wide. I think he had 14 attacks. And he had also got Entwining Roots off on me. So he was hitting on 3s, re-rolling. So I think, I don't know how many hits he got, but it was like 13 or 12 or something, I think. But then he did like 7 wounds, and I didn't save anything with my 5-up armor. I was like, oh, this is all of a sudden a problem. And I did like 2 or 3 back to him. I did so few that it was an auto break. So basically I actually ended up losing the objective here. And the reason I lost the objective is because I had these, like, a couple of Wildhorns and BSB left, and I was trying to keep him out of my objective, going like, okay, I'm going to buff them with totems. I'm going to keep you from getting... Like, if I get lucky, I'll keep you from getting into my objective because I'll just hold you here for long enough. And I didn't consider the Wildhorns a credible threat at all, when realistically I probably should have, knowing that with Druidism they might just break me. I had lost a decent few models to the Razor Tusk Chariot at this point, which is why I wasn't just like steadfast. So I should have given an Evoc buff over here, because that probably, well, I mean, when he rolled so well, maybe it wouldn't have mattered, but probably would have turned the combat there, or at least I would feel less dumb about the fact that if he beat my Longhorns with his unequipped Wildhorns when I had buffed Longhorns, I would feel a little bit more aggrieved. But yeah, so that was another mistake over there. I think the big mistake, basically, as I've discussed ad nauseum, was charging the Longhorns in the center. But, I mean, that is also something, though, that I would come back to a similar situation in a later game, and I'd go like, no, I actually remember, I know this is bad. I know I shouldn't rely on that. So it's still quite a helpful thing to have happened. Anyway, that was the game. I lost 19-1 despite my amazingly lucky start to it. And really, realistically, if I don't charge those Longhorns, I think the end result of this game is probably drawish or a small win to me. Which feels like the matchup must have been pretty bad, or I've done something else pretty dumb. just because I got rid of those Gore-Tex that I was so worried about so early. I did force quite a few tests on those Longhorns with my Razor Tusks. I think... Oh, actually, I guess I only forced one, and then I forced two, I think, with my Wildhorns. Leadership 9, all of them unrerollable. Maybe that's getting to the point where I had a few plays, I guess. Still doesn't make the individual decision with the Wildhorns fine, but... Yeah, wasn't overly happy with the list in general. So I had my third game. So my third game for this tournament. We're not actually playing because my opponent's really busy, and I don't like the list enough. So I'm not really I'm not going to force anyone to play, and I don't really want to continue with this variation. I'm kind of thinking of a few changes, and one, I think if I drop the Minotaurs and I drop the Razor Tusks, I'm pretty sure that's roughly the points. I've got the list written, I just don't know the exact, if I needed to lose a couple of other things. But it's roughly a straight swap to get 3 Cyclops in. And I think that might be interesting, because the Minotaurs haven't been all that useful in this style of a list. I really like the unit, but in this list I haven't found they have a great deal of utility. The Razor Tusks I actually am really quite liking with Druidism magic. But the sum total, I think, 3 Razor Tusks is worth... 3 Cyclops is worth more than those 3 units. So that's what I'm trying next. And I'm still sort of racking my brain on the Beast Lord build, trying not to go for something that just everybody takes. Also want to use paired weapons because of the model that I have for him. And also still not sure if I even want to really continue with this style. I really like this unit of Longhorns with the ambushing Soothsayer. I'm just thinking maybe I can get rid of some of the other stuff. Maybe I don't need the Beast Lord, maybe I don't need the BSB in this block. What I'd really, really like for Beast Herds is if my Druid could become a Centaur. Or a Minotaur. I'd like a Wizard that didn't have just the option of a slow Chariot or sitting in Wildhorns or Longhorns, basically. Because I don't like bunkers. Bunkers are annoying, and you can kit out Beast Herd characters to be quite survivable in combat if you need to. And I'd really just like to have more options of where to put my wizards, basically. It's not even that I'm like a wizard who can move around fast as a centaur would be really cool. It's just I'd like to be able to put him in centaurs, because then it expands the amount of units that I can take, because I don't have to take something where I'm like, alright, this is either a bunker or a combat unit for my wizard. Anyway, that's not happening. But yeah, so I'm still really considering a lot of things with this list. I have nothing on the horizon. I have no events that I'm going to. I have no online events in the pipeline. I'm not sure if I will go. I don't know when the next one of these will be. I'm not sure if I'll do it. So I don't know what will be going on the channel. Sometimes I just have vaguely rantish videos where I just talk about things. I did one on chess clocks recently. Not recently, a few months ago. It was actually before I stopped, had my brief hiatus. But it just, a lot of the time when I'm just waffling on, I feel like it's not that valuable. It's more sort of like a podcast thing where you need to have someone that you're actually talking to. But yeah, that's basically the sitch for the channel. I don't have any news for you. Somebody in Sydney ran another event so I can go to it and make more content. Alright guys, see ya.